So, I genuinely did not expect my last video to get nearly as many views as it did. So to everyone who watched, subscribed, and commented, thank you so much. So hello there, this is Sev aka Bonier, and this is kind of a response video to the last video that I made called Being a Comic Artist is Lonely. So yeah, I'm not gonna lie, the response was a little overwhelming, but in a good way. So although I tried to respond to as many comments as I could, I always ended up I was trying to respond to them, and then as I did that, they just like kept flooding in, so I would respond to one, and then I would just like get more emails about there being more comments, and I was like, ah! But honestly, I learned so much from all of the comments. So the fact that so many of you came out of your way, out of the woodworks to like share your thoughts, your suggestions, and all the different ways in which you make connections in the comic community, I really appreciate that. I got some responses even from people who aren't comic artists. They were other creators, other kinds of artists. There was even some people that I recognize, which was actually a little bit scary, but also kind of exciting. To realize that they actually watched my video, but like also you're kind of like, oh my god, they watched my video, what? So I replied to a lot of them, but I still do want to go over some of the few thoughts I had about some things that were really eye-opening to me. I got a lot of responses from people with really cool projects who said a lot of really insightful things that I didn't necessarily think about but make so much sense. So with that being said though, if you want to like look at what everybody said, I really do encourage you to just look into that video's comment section and just look at just all of the different things, because I couldn't include everything in this video. Okay, so one of the first comments I wanted to talk about was from Victory Goth, who explained that they signed a book deal to get their webcomic traditionally published, which first of all is very awesome, and I congratulate you on that achievement. But they said that they actually felt even more lonely after the process of getting traditionally published. Not only are they not able to share any of the pages or any of the information about their book because they are under NDA, they also feel so different from their other webcomic friends since their webcomic friends can't really relate to their struggles, but not only that, they also can't share what's actually going on in their journey. So I think that this was just such an important thing for them to say, because a lot of the time we don't really hear from people who are traditionally published. And I think, like, at least in the indie webcomic sphere, we subconsciously kind of consider those who get published to be the pinnacle of success sometimes. We don't realize that being traditionally published versus being indie published, or like indie publishing or webcomic publishing, are just all different paths with their own pros and cons. It's really just a matter of which path works best for you, but that doesn't mean that those different paths aren't going to be experiencing the same kinds of pitfalls. It's just going to be in different ways. So anyway, I just want to thank you for watching the video and commenting. So another comment I heard from was from someone who actually does webcomics professionally and has been at it since 2015, which was really awesome to hear from that kind of perspective. The creator, Dr. Glasgow, of a popular webcomic And We Go, also resonated with the video, and they explained how they've always wanted to meet other webcomic artists. They expressed how much difficulty there is involved with all of the different processes that go along with just like marketing the comic, social media, and not even being able to talk about the comic that they're making with other people. But thanks again for watching the video. So I really appreciated your comment, especially since you're someone who does webcomics professionally, which actually would be one of my goals in the future. It's really sad though to hear that you're also experiencing these issues, and I hope you'll be able to tackle some of these things soon as well. Being a webcomic creator is really tough. I also think that your comment is so important, because those of us who do webcomics and indie comics, we oftentimes just don't understand that sometimes even if you achieve a goal, you're still gonna run into problems, you're still gonna have troubles, you know, like anyone else. Achieving a goal or like success, quote unquote, is not the end all be all. There's always gonna be more. Not only that, from what I can tell, their comic has adult content in it, and I feel like people who make adult content are in a really unique position as well, where it's really difficult to make deep connections with other artists. Like, for example, most conventions don't allow adult art to be like publicly displayed, so artists who make adult content are kind of in this position where you need to have things that aren't adult to display, but if you're doing a comic, we already know how much work goes into comics. I'm pretty sure that's why most people who make adult comics can't really go to conventions, so you're kind of at the liberty of just reaching your audience online. My main work isn't necessarily adult, but I've even found myself a little bit nervous at events just because my book is 17 plus, older teen, because of some different subjects, and you know, when you've got parents walking around with their kids and stuff, they're gonna look at whatever they want, and you're a little bit just like, oh no. So I can definitely understand that. Not only that, most platforms these days are very, very particular about the kinds of content that is on them. Webtoons, for instance, to pass even. A lot of people who make comics that aren't necessarily like full-on explicit, but have, you know, whether that be like innuendos or any kind of like maybe nudity or something like that, stuff that's not for kids, it can get censored, or you can just get taken down, or you'll be told to go elsewhere. So it's really difficult actually for people who do adult content. So I empathize with a lot of you all. And then they say, like, at the end, it's like, I don't know how to fix this sort of isolation in a way that doesn't seem forward. Do I just ask, hey, do you want to be webcomic buddies? And from what I've heard from some other people, they basically say that they take the initiative and they usually just reach out to people, which definitely can be like hard and nerve-wracking and really opens yourself up to the feelings of rejection, being brushed off or something, like what Victory Goth said, how they reached out to someone who got published by the same publisher and they just completely never responded, which is sad. I also got a response from a YouTuber and a fellow webcomic artist, Voltergeist, who I have seen some videos from before, and they also commented that they expressed how they recently considered giving up just due to the fact that they've been at it for so many years and invested so many times in their webcomic, and it just really feels like no one is reading. And even though, you know, in my reply I said the same thing, but like, I really hear you out on this. I've considered this a lot of times, like, I'm not even gonna lie. It's really demotivating. I also want to make a video sometime about motivation and how I've kept myself from not giving up on my webcomic for basically 10 years now. It's been going on about like 10, or this April would make it 11 years. There's just so much that goes into it, like, don't get me wrong, but like, I don't always feel motivated to work on my comic either. It's like always like an up and down thing. I feel like that's sort of natural and normal, but yeah, I mean, there's just so many things that go into like motivation. But really, like I said, the community aspect is a really big part of what keeps your motivation, and that's kind of what I had kind of been lacking, what I'm trying to get better at. So yeah. So another thing was a fellow YouTuber, Mitch Maki, actually did a response to my first video while I was in the middle of editing this video. He had some interesting perspectives on how he deals with the issue, particularly streaming while on YouTube is something that he does to mediate some of the loneliness. So a suggestion seem to be watching other creators stream and interacting with them while they do that, while they draw, and you can draw along with them, so almost like a virtual co-working when you think about it, which is a pretty cool thing to keep in mind. He also had a lot of other things to say in the video about his own personal perspective, which I do encourage you check it out if you have the chance. So Mitch's video, and also just this whole thing with me reading all of the comments and me kind of doing YouTube now in general, all of this kind of makes me realize that YouTube in itself actually has been, for a very long time now, a source for a community. And now actually being someone who is putting my voice out there on the internet, which was a thing I was always very scared to do, kind of puts all of this in a new perspective for me. I think now that I've had a lot of involvement in this subject, I actually have so much hope for the new year when it comes to artists making their own communities, despite all the social media drama, if you're keeping up with all the TikTok news that's going on in the US. But yeah, I just think that we really need communities, and we need to get better at forming them with or without social media platforms, because the platforms are essentially just that, platforms. They're like tools or foundations, but we really shouldn't be so reliant on them. And that's yet another thing for me to think about, which I won't get into in this video. I did get some comments from people who were saying that they don't really want to make friends, or not like they don't want to make friends, it's just that they feel like it's an idealistic kind of fantasy to make friends with other artists. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to be dismissive of the skepticism towards making friends within artist circles, or any kind of circle where people all have one thing in common, which is that they're trying to find their success within their own skill, like a creative field or something like that, whether it be like any kind of situation where you're in a job, some sort of trade or something of that nature. So I did get a comment, and this commenter talked about their previous experiences with other artists and how they were very friendly at first, but the interactions all became very fake and even judgmental. And I get the impression that the commenter doesn't want to make friends anymore because of these past experiences. And to something like this, I would say people are just gonna be fake, and they're going to use you if they can in some situations. Like, it's sad, but, you know, some people will really just pull you down if they're not happy with themselves or their lives either. But at the same time, this isn't a phenomenon that is unique just to creatives. This is the same kind of dynamic that occurs with all kinds of relationships, whether that be romantic, platonic friendships, coworkers, or even your own family. But I just want to say, like, don't let other people's negativity bring you down and limit you from pursuing the experiences that you desire. And I don't mean to say it in like this blanket statement positive way, like don't let people bring you down, but like a serious, like it's a normal and rational thing for you to desire and crave connection. It's like normal for you to want to have a friend who shares the same interest, which just might be like art, a creative thing, or like comics. They might not have to do the art thing, or they might not have to do the comic thing, but I do think that, like, as long as you have the willingness to care about someone, to empathize with other people, to try to understand, you know, to love someone, I think that you also deserve that, especially if that's what you want. There were also other people who didn't necessarily not want to make friends, they just are afraid of a lot of the implications that come along with trying to befriend artists, because it's hard to talk about things that aren't related to the craft. And then, you know, if you're not talking about comics, then you're talking about yourself or getting to know someone else, and that can also open up yourself to more feelings of rejection. But, like, don't get me wrong, like, it's the thing that really sucks, because it's the fear of not wanting to, like, get hurt. Because I'm not gonna say, oh, you're not gonna get hurt, because you probably will. Sad to say it, you might make friends, and they might just not value you as much as you valued them. Like, it's kind of a thing that does happen. So, like, I don't want to push people to do something that they're not comfortable with, obviously, but I also feel like I don't want people to feel limited to do something that they actually deep down inside really want to experience. So, although I made my last video with no intention of, like, actually starting a community myself, the response from the video made me kind of have this sudden idea to, like, roll up my sleeves and maybe try my hand at making yet another server, because I technically already have a server for my project updates, which I also want to be a place for other creatives to share the stuff they're working on as well. So I do have that linked in my video's description. I think after a lot of deliberation, I'm just gonna continue with the one I already have. I mean, as much as I like to tack more work onto myself and make myself go crazy with the things that I try to make myself do, I think that there are already a lot of webcomic servers that are out there that are great communities. I'll list a few if you want to try to join them. There's also many comic YouTubers that have their own servers as well, that a lot, like, have tons of other comic creatives that you can make connections with and just join and try it out and see how that goes. However, I do hear from a lot of people the grievances of joining a really big server community, and I feel the same way. It's not necessarily that it's so big, but it does depend on how welcoming people are and if they're really willing to make you feel included if you're someone new. Some servers, it really feels like people are just trying to promote their own stuff and not actually trying to open themselves up to looking at what other people are doing. I don't know, people are hungry and you can't blame them. We oftentimes are chasing dreams and goals and we'll do a lot of things to get there. So sometimes it's like how those servers feel like to me. Not even just servers, I'm just talking about from what I've seen over the years in the webcomic community, for example, the sub for sub things. It's just almost like you're in a massive room with a bunch of people, and sometimes it doesn't necessarily feel like people are really connecting because they are moving with motivation. They're trying to do something more transactional. It's like a motivation not to make a genuine connection, it's just an effort to get people to subscribe. But now that I've had the time to think about all the suggestions and all the different tidbits everyone's had, I actually think there's some merit in you starting your own server or community or something. So yeah, so it doesn't have to be a server, it could be a Facebook group, a co-working meetup. Somebody actually suggested like renting out an office space and sharing it with other comic artists, which I actually think is a cool idea if you end up finding yourself like being surrounded by a lot of other comic creators like within the same city. I think that's actually a pretty cool idea. But for a lot of people, I think the most reasonable thing to use is Discord. I think if you're actually getting your own projects started, making a server, particularly for your own stuff, is actually really good because you can draw in the people who are interested in your work, and if you make connections with other artists and they join your server, they're more than likely going to be creating stuff that's like tangentially similar to what you're making. So any of the people who are interested in your work will probably be interested in their work, and then that kind of creates the word of mouth sort of advertising and like that community connection that I was kind of hoping, you know, like that I feel like actually that makes more sense than like a huge server with people who have different interests and they're making things that are very different from each other and they're moving in different ways, and it's a little bit more disconnected. It's really hard to find like that group within something so big, in my opinion. Not saying it's not going to work out. I think that you should join big servers and then you should also join small servers, and you should be trying to find people. I mean, like trying doing everything if you can is better than doing nothing. So like going out and meeting people at conventions, if you can do conventions, if you have any that are near you and local, that's a really good thing to do. Even just going there as an attendee and just maybe talking to other artists is a great thing to do too. I followed other artists from that who came up to my table and, you know, learned about what they were working on and stuff like that. It's very nice. So I kind of want to wrap up the video, but you don't really see the subject of making friends covered in these kinds of topics of like success in comics, because I think that a lot of creative communities in general see the whole like finding a friend as not something that is very productive. But I really do think that making connections like in a genuine way where you actually feel like somebody understands you is actually really, really important to your success, because that can make your life more fulfilling, in my opinion. So I'm actually just really happy to have made the video and that people resonated with the subject. And like, listen, I'm not trying to say that you're gonna be besties with everyone and like go out for ice cream socials and like getting invited to people's weddings and like all that. I'm just like more or less talking about deep connections. A friendship in a way that's not necessarily super close in what we think, but more of like a peer, or at least somebody that you trust. Somebody you trust enough to be vulnerable with, and especially in a way where both of you won't let ego get in the way of your friendship and your bond. Somebody that can relate to you, somebody who understands you in that way that maybe other people can't, that maybe your other friends can't. That's why I feel like a friend who has the same creative interest can understand you in a way that nobody else can. And I think that that is very valuable to have in your life. I mean, at the same time, it's not easy. There's so much that goes into the idea of friendship, that I'm not really qualified to give out advice on things like attachment theory and things that are healthy and not healthy and having proper boundaries and all of that. But at the same time, I do feel that in my heart, that if you want a friend, you shouldn't be lonely. That is totally valid. And if you want to seek a friend, I hope that you will find one. With that being said, this is Sev, aka Bonier, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!